I think Scott Linehan's gone regardless, and depending on how the Cowboys come out and get this game, I mean, if they come out flat and they just aren't able to, put anything together and they lose this football game, I don't see any reason why they should keep Jason Garrett if that's the case. I don't care if they won the division or not. They have really got to show something for the ownership, the Jones family, McClay, to believe that Jason Garrett's the guy to get the job done.
Today is Friday, January 4th. This is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. I'm Ari Temkin, along with Patrick Conn, the Cowboys Beat, with Ari and Conn. And it is time for the postseason for the Dallas Cowboys. And, Patrick, when I talked to you earlier this week, you basically said you think the outcome of the Cowboys-Seahawks game on Saturday night would be one of two things, and both of what you said and what you told me, man, was Seattle winning.
Mm-hmm.
You basically had two outcomes. One was, I think, 27-10. Well, the other was 27-20 or 27-23. It was a closer game, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But then the next day, you texted me and said, "All right, I think the Cowboys win." So what changed?
Well, when you look at the picture as a whole, neutral site type deal, I think Seattle had the better team. So I still do think they have the better team. But as we know in the NFL, the better team doesn't always win. You look at what Seattle, how they look at home versus how they look on the road. Same with Cowboys. These are both teams that are built similar. They both struggle on the road. And Seattle is a different football team on the road. So I kind of was like, okay, yes, there's things in this, things about Seattle that's really good and what they can do. Seattle may win this game, but I just feel in my gut, based on how the Cowboys perform at home versus how the Seahawks play on the road, that's why I'm kind of leaning towards a Cowboys victory Saturday night.
You brought this up to me. The Seahawks haven't played many road games of late. They played 4 of their last 5 at home, and the one road game they played in San Francisco, they lost to Nick Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of to accentuate your point, right? Like they've struggled on the road, especially recently. The thing that I look at is, right, these two teams played week 3, and obviously the Cowboys are a completely different organization and team since that week 3 game. They're a better offense, considerably better on offense than they were in that game. Not just because of the addition of Amari Cooper, but because I think Dak Prescott is a better player since then. I think the receiving core is a better group since then. Michael Gallup has grown up. Michael Gallup dropped a pass that was led to an Earl Thomas interception in that game. Earl Thomas had 2 interceptions. Cowboys had 3 turnovers. They were -3 in the turnover ratio. I remember Zeke stepped out of bounds on a long touchdown run that he had that took points off the board. So Cowboys kind of got in their own way in that game. Cowboys offense is better. Cowboys defense is probably better too, because in that game Sean Lee played a bunch of snaps. Leighton Vander Esch wasn't yet Leighton Vander Esch. So the Cowboys are a better football team overall than they were week 3. What about the Seahawks? Seahawks offense, I think, is better. I think, they forgot about running the football before that game, and they really made a concerted effort after that game moving forward to be a running football team, and that turned into them being the number 1 running team in the NFL. So Seattle's offense is better. Now Seattle's defense is probably worse because they lose Earl Thomas, and even though Bradley McDougald has stepped up and become a pretty good safety for them, I just don't think you can become a better defense with the loss of Earl Thomas. So I guess I'm at a loss for how to pick this game because I think Cowboys offense is better, Cowboys defense is better than it was week 3, but I also think the Seattle offense is better, and I think they have the best quarterback in this game, and that's what scares me because the Cowboys defense hasn't been great since that New Orleans game. They've given up 25 points per game in their last 4 games. They dropped out of the top 10 in points per possession defense, which is an important metric in terms of indicators of success of the postseason. So Russell Wilson and his ability to make plays outside the pocket and get Tyler Lockett and other guys open down the field, that's what frightens me about this game from the Cowboys' perspective.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand that. You think about Dallas Cowboys are a football team that gives up 70 yards rushing at home. So the big thing that helps Seattle is being able to run the football with Carson. But I feel like with the Cowboys defense that's pretty stifling as far as how they perform at home. They're a much better football team in that instance. So you look at that and go, okay, well, if the Cowboys can stop the run, they were able to control or contain Russell Wilson week one. It's going to be a little bit different, of course, because they're going to have Doug Baldwin in this game. They didn't have him the first time, so that was one of the reasons I think that it can be kind of a toss-up in this game. But when you look at it, I like you said, I think if they're a better football team, the Cowboys made a lot of mental mistakes in that game. Whether it was Zeke stepping out of bounds before catching the ball, so, that play gets wiped out, or, Michael Gallup, he's stronger mentally, the ball comes right off of his hands, and we saw in that game against New York that Dak built some confidence in that game. I mean, you saw the way he was playing. I think he has a real confidence and connection with Blake Jarwin. Does that come into effect? Because the leading receiver in the game, when they played week 3 was Jeff Swaim. Well, Swaim's out for the season. Does Blake Jarwin take some of those? But and they put some stuff on film for Seattle. They're showing Blake Jarwin running up the seam. Well, how do you beat that cover 2 that they like to play? You do it in the middle of the field. Well, if you got a tight end that's running up the seam, they're probably going to put a linebacker on him, and I'm going to take that matchup every single time. Cole Beasley, same thing. You can run him in the middle of the field, and those are some ways that they can beat this defense. And as you said, they lost Earl Thomas. They're very young in that secondary, and I think that these guys that they have, you talk about Seattle has the better quarterback. Well, the Cowboys have the better playmakers. So you got to count on those guys to make plays in this football game.
That's interesting because I think they do. But, Tyler Lockett, you think about, he's having a huge season this year. The thing about Seattle is because their running game is so effective, they kind of lure you to sleep with their running game and kind of force you to, really cheat up on it a little bit. And then they beat you over the top with Tyler Lockett or plays down the field. Lockett is averaging like 18 yards a reception for a guy that has, leads the team in receptions. I think around 90. Like that's a ridiculous number and shows you, they don't take a lot of shots down the field, but when they do, they make it count. And, that's again, there's reason to have a lot of faith in this Cowboys defense, especially at home. Especially, with the quote unquote motivation they should have going into this game and yada, yada, yada. But, the wild card here is, when stuff breaks down and Wilson's able to escape and get guys open down the field, it's really tough. That's the one part where I think they can really, make a significant difference in this game. Let me ask you something. Ari Temkin, Patrick Conn, this is the Cowboys beat on CLNS Media. So we're getting you ready for Cowboys and Seahawks Saturday night, AT&T Stadium wild card round. Do you think there's more pressure on the Cowboys to win this game than there is on the Seahawks? Seahawks have had a lot of playoff success. Russell Wilson's played in 12 playoff games already in his career. They're a staple in the playoffs. They weren't supposed to be a playoff team. You can make the same argument for the Cowboys too, but Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have had a significant amount more success than Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott, or Jason Garrett in general. So do you think there's more pressure on the Cowboys?
Oh, absolutely. They're at home. And the more that I think it over, and I know that we'd gone back and forth about Jason Garrett being safe if they make the playoffs, but I think if they go out and put a stinker out, it could very well cost Jason Garrett his job.
Really?
Gut feeling. I did see, and I don't know how true this is, but I saw something with 97.5 The Fanatic in Philly said they had Adam Schefter on, and he said that Jason Garrett could very well lose his job, regardless of them making the playoffs.
Wow.
And I don't know what to make of that because I didn't see it anywhere else. But I don't listen to Philly radio. It just happened to come across the Twitter timeline. So, that's interesting to me. And I honestly think that I could see that, and then I'm hearing that Jason Garrett is more involved in the offensive meetings last week and this week. So, I definitely think that there's a lot of pressure on the Cowboys to come out and perform. The good thing for Cowboys fans is when Jason Garrett wins in the playoffs, I know he only has 2. They're both wild card round games that they would host.
So he has shown a propensity to winning wild card games.
Yes, it's just anything beyond the division round they haven't seen a conference championship. It's just that division round really is kind of what bites them. So there's the big issue. But also, so when you look at all that, like you were saying, the pressure amount, I don't think there's as much pressure as Seattle because of, various circumstances. Pete Carroll's job is safe. They're in the playoffs pretty much every season. They have the experience. They've been to a couple Super Bowls, so there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jason Garrett, and I think that's probably why he was more involved in the offensive meetings.
So I heard that too, and also Dak, being involved in those meetings too. So did you see anything in the Giants game? Have you seen anything in last couple of games that you thought was new in terms of what they were doing schematically in those games that maybe gives us a pretty good idea of the involvement of other people other than Linehan in their offensive planning?
Honestly, I didn't, for the simple fact that it was hard to gauge in that New York game just because of who was playing and who wasn't. So, they knew they were going to have to adjust a little bit without Zeke because none of the backs behind them were going to have the type of impact of Zeke. I mean, I think it was last year against New York. Rod Smith has a huge game, but that was a team that wasn't going anywhere. So it was really hard to gauge on that. And then obviously this year they sit Zeke, so he's in. There really wasn't much, but it just seemed like a concerted effort to have Dak throw the ball more in this game. So from that standpoint, it kind of felt that way. But I really can't say I saw anything schematically that changed much. I guess you could say Swaim running up the seams. That was new.
Right. No, for sure. That was something else that I noticed too, that they're usually, pretty basic routes for their tight ends. And so,
and Amari he ran a couple of sluggo routes that, if Dak gets him the ball, he probably has 2 touchdowns. So, he's running the slant and go, which for a guy like Amari who has great ability to change the direction, stop on a dime, those are great routes for him, and something that and that's something else that's been put on tape. So that's going to be something that possibly Seattle's worried about that slant and go, so maybe they back out the coverage a little bit, but instead of running the slant and go, he just runs the slant, comes across the middle of the field, and he's able to beat the coverage. So maybe some of that was put on film just to give Seattle something to worry about.
Who do you think is the most important player for the Cowboys in this game? Zeke?
I am going to say Connor Williams.
Yeah, Xavier Suafilo, who'd taken over at guard, has missed all of practice this week, DNP the entire week, meaning it's tough to think he's going to be available to play. So
I think it was listed as doubtful.
Yeah, I mean, guys in practice all week. That's hard to think he'd play.
And I say Connor Williams just because we know what Tyron is. I mean, yeah, he's not the same Tyron of years past, but he's still playing really, really well, despite what all he's been dealing with. Right. Joe Looney is what he is. I'm just worried about that matchup inside. Connor Williams really struggled for the most part in that game against Seattle. So they've got to find a way to protect the quarterback, and I think that also is going to factor in the run game. So I would say Connor Williams 1. And obviously I'm going to say Ezekiel Elliott's probably 2 because they really need to get him running the ball, try and, keep Dak upright. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to say Randy Gregory is going to be my X factor on that side of the ball. He wasn't playing against Seattle last time. He's probably on the defensive side of the ball outside of a Jalen or an LVE. He's probably the hottest player right now on that defense.
Yeah, what does he have, 5 sacks in the last 7 games?
2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. So, yeah, he's playing the best football he's played probably as a pro.
And, Wilson takes sacks. He's 51 in the year, which obviously is not as many as Dak has taken at 56, but 51 in the year is still a pretty good number.
And they give up 3.5 sacks per game on the road.
But it hasn't seemed to make a difference because they're, even though he's been sacked a ton, he's not turning the ball over at a huge rate, and he's not, they're still making plays down the field. So,
well, no, but they are 4-4 on the road, so they're a 500 football team. So it still factors in. I mean, but when you look at the overall numbers, yeah, it doesn't look like it's making much of a dent. But that makes it a little more manageable for the Cowboys, and if they can establish a lead and allow those guys to get after the quarterback, because it is still a porous offensive line. Dallas has shown this ability in recent years that when they go up against a weak offensive line, they have terrible games. So they got to figure out a way to get to the quarterback in this game.
Yeah, no doubt about that. They've got to figure out a way to affect him because, again, he gets outside the pocket and he escapes. I mean, he's one of the best in the league at doing that. When I asked the question about who's the most important player in this game, my initial feeling was Zeke. It's a great point on Connor Williams, though, because, this is a good defensive front for Seattle, and it gave the Cowboys all kinds of issues week 3 when they played. I mean, Frank Clark had a big game. They have another, Jerron Reed, who's got 10.5 sacks this year for Seattle.
Yeah, the other guy that I'm worried about is them getting to the second level and putting a hat on Bobby Wagner because he wrecked that game for the Cowboys.
He did, and people look at the Cowboys and say, why don't they run more, zone read? And I look at that game and basically, what they did was Wagner just stayed at home, and he read the reader, like the zone read is about reading what the defense with the linebackers are trying to do. Mm-hmm. And all Bobby Wagner did was just kind of stay at home and read Dak, and so kind of forced him to make a decision. I thought I thought the Cowboys, their approach in that game was to use a lot of zone read, and I think Bobby Wagner took them out of it. And I don't know that we kind of go back to they should have gone to more of that this season, and they didn't. I think because teams kind of looked at defending them that way, and you'll notice they run it not as often as maybe fans would hope that they would run it.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't have Travis Frederick. Because he can make those, calls. He can, adjust those calls and whatnot. And him and Zach both are really good about getting to that second level and getting to that guy. So, and that's the thing is Connor Williams didn't have that rapport with him yet. I mean, like I said, you had him and Looney, so this was the 3rd game of the season, so those guys had only been together for 3 weeks, in the regular season. Obviously they played throughout training camp together. But until you get those live game reps and right. You're in those situations, it's really hard for them to get those guys prepared for that.
That's why I hate this Philo injury even more because it seems like those guys were finally getting a hang of one another, a familiarity. And, they've just had so many different guys playing that offensive line. It's kind of amazing how well the line has played considering, they've played a lot of guys that weren't on the roster to start this season.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I mean, and I think Xavier, he struggled a bit playing, but I think the winning masked that a little bit, winning 7 of the last 8 games, so it kind of feels like, he played better. Watching Connor Williams over the last few weeks having to play some spot starts over on that right side, I thought he did very well, so if he can take that experience and play with a similar style back on the left side where he will be for the immediate future. I think that they'll be okay, but they might need to give him some help with Reed. They might need to help out Tyron with Frank Clark because he took it to Tyron Smith the last time they played.
For me also Leighton Vander Esch, importance of him, against such a good running team. and his ability to play both the run and the pass, which has been pretty consistent and good this year. And then, there's the obvious piece of their secondary, which, Tyler Lockett really broke the game open with that second touchdown, put them up, I think, 14-3 at that point, and that was basically it for the Cowboys at that point. An early touchdown, whatever it was, or it wasn't. I mean, it might have been the first half where he got that touchdown Lockett down the seam, or rather down the sideline. So the secondary, which I think has been playing better, certainly since that game. I mean, you look at the Atlanta game and the Saints game and say, like, that's as good as we've seen this defense play all season. And so you hope that they can get some of that back, because, I mean, that was a lockdown defense. I mean, their line and their secondary was on a string in that game, just playing cohesively. So,
they gave up 2 offensive touchdowns combined to those 2 teams.
Yeah. Those are 2 of the most, premier offenses in the NFL going into those games, and they just completely silenced them. But we haven't really seen their secondary play at that level since that New Orleans game.
Yeah, so you hope that you see that level, and I'm sure Chris Richard, as fiery as he is, has really gotten into him this week about that. So I'm sure that and it's the playoffs, so the emotions are going to be high in this game. So I really think there's going to be a ton of energy Saturday night when they finally kick this thing off, and we'll find out if this defense is up to the challenge, or if it's going to be another long off season for the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, let's talk perspective on this too. So if they lose this game, how is this season looked at? As a failure, disappointment, fire Garrett, fire Linehan?
Oh, I absolutely believe it's a failure. You talk about winning 3 division titles in 5 years under Jason Garrett and walking away with 1 playoff victory. Yeah, it's failure, straight up. I think Scott Linehan's gone regardless, and depending on how the Cowboys come out and get this game, I mean, if they come out flat and they just aren't able to, put anything together and they lose this football game, I don't see any reason why they should keep Jason Garrett if that's the case. I don't care if they won the division or not. They have really got to show something for the ownership, the Jones family, McClay, to believe that Jason Garrett's the guy to get the job done.
Yeah, from what I've heard, there's basically 0% chance that Scott Linehan comes back. Pending. I'm
hearing the same thing. So
a Super Bowl, which doesn't seem likely, right? So but I don't think there's any chance Garrett's gone. Like, I just don't. As much as Cowboys fans are going to call for that, especially if they lose in the wild card round, I just don't see any way that happens. Now, I also, I think they should win this game. They should win this game because of the reasons you brought up. They're at home. They have a considerably better offense than the offense that played against the Seattle team earlier this season. They have a legitimate offense. I mean, you look at some of the numbers and Dak Prescott as far as third down completion percentage, especially in the last half of the season, and I mean, they've been a different offense, and they've been a more confident offense. So I think that means something, especially at home. And again, the defense has certainly been a question mark, but you expect them in this game with all the anticipation playing at home that this defense should show up. So I mean, they should win this game. So then let's play the role of, all right, what if they win this game and then lose in the next round? Disappointing year?
I don't think so. I mean,
less disappointing.
It's less disappointing just for the simple fact that you win this football game, you're likely going to New Orleans. New Orleans is a tough place to play, and they're kind of viewed as the Super Bowl favorites right now. As far as
they don't really lose at home.
No, they don't. They have a raucous crowd. New Orleans is a rocking place to have. If you've ever been to that stadium, it's loud, and and that's where Dallas struggles. I mean, they struggled in Seattle because of their communication. Why? Because they couldn't hear each other.
Yeah.
Because that crowd up there gets so loud, and New Orleans has the same style. So likely they're going there. I mean, unless there's an upset in the other game, and that would send Dallas to L.A., which I like their chances a little better in LA because that was probably going to feel more like a home game.
Yeah.
To them with the huge following of Cowboy fans that live in California. So, but I'm not going to say it'll be disappointing. It's, it'll give some experience to Dak Prescott. He'll have a playoff win under his belt. Luckily for Cowboys fans, there's no Green Bay in the playoffs, so they don't have to worry about them.
Yeah, but I guess unlucky for Cowboys fans, they probably are playing in the first round the second best quarterback in the NFC, right?
Right. Yeah, I would go Breeze and then probably Wilson. I'm sure there's some other names you could put up there, but yeah, those two are probably the two best, especially when it comes to the postseason play, because these guys, they've been there, they know what it takes to win a Super Bowl.
I think there's a pretty good chance this team loses the division round in New Orleans. I think Cowboys fans will not be happy with that outcome. They'll probably ask for Garrett's head, but I think that's probably unrealistic, especially because Lincoln Riley's not coming here. He signed an extension with Oklahoma. He's not coming. So in that vein, where else would you go with your coach? And obviously that's not a great reason to keep a coach, but I do think though this offseason they're going to be looking for new offensive and new defensive coordinators.
Yeah, I will give you. I don't have a defensive coordinator name, but I'll give you an offensive guy to keep an eye on. And I'm poaching this guy straight from New Orleans, Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell, of course, former Miami Dolphins interim coach, former Dallas Cowboy, of course.
Mm-hmm. Strong ties to Parcells. He brings a very disciplined look. You could also say Joe Lombardi, who's the quarterback's coach there.
Yeah.
So those are two guys that I'd look at. I'd look at it as somebody with Drew Brees. I'm sorry, with Sean Payton ties. That's kind of
Parcells, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and so I'm looking at those two guys as possible. I would lean more towards Campbell. Because if the thing is, if Linehan goes, I don't think any of the offensive staff is going to stay. Maybe Colombo, maybe Sanjay Lal, but I don't think the quarterback coach is going to stay, Kellen Moore, because he's kind of tied to Scott Linehan.
Yeah, exactly.
So if Linehan goes, he's gone too. So yeah, those are two names off the top of my head right now that I'm looking at to see who could possibly be an offensive coordinator for the Cowboys. Defensively, I hope that it's Chris Richard. But at the same time, he's a hot commodity right now.
Yeah. Right. That's why I think there's a good chance they're going to be preparing to hire new coordinators on both sides of the ball. The one thing I'll say is, you kind of have to look at the road that this team has traveled, right? If you assess a season, and obviously that's not what we're doing here. We're previewing the playoffs, which is the exact opposite of assessing a season and looking back on that season. But I think, when you do, you sort of have to look at, all right, where did this thing start? What were expectations? What have we learned about this team? I think Dak Prescott, the way he's played, especially of late, especially when you consider the development part of it, that it's just year 3 for him, that's a major positive. We knew this team and this offense would be better with the addition of Amari Cooper, and that would be great for Dak, but I think moving into next season, regardless of the outcome of this year, that's certainly something that's exciting. And I don't know. We'll see what the Cowboys do this offseason with his contract, if they choose to extend him or instead wait the final year, next year of his contract. Jason Garrett, look, I've been a critic of Jason Garrett. I've never been the biggest Jason Garrett fan, but one of the things that I've seen from Garrett this year is the ability to evolve and adapt over the course of games within a game, which was something that I thought was a fatal flaw for Garrett that he didn't really see before. And, I've seen I've seen that at different points throughout this season. This team has changed and evolved over the course of the year, and it's all of that as the coach is doing. So, I think regardless of the outcome of the season, and again, I think they're going to win their wild card game against Seattle. There are a lot of pieces for this Cowboys franchise to feel good about going into this offseason, but who knows? Maybe they end up winning a Super Bowl. So obviously that will make them feel good about this offseason anyways.
Yeah, I think the thing with Jason Garrett, it's going to be next year, I think, is going to be his big test. Is can he win on Saturday, obviously, and can he build upon that going into next season, and can he put together a legitimate contender? You talk about a team that's one of the 5th youngest in the NFL, and they start 3-5 and they go on that run to make the playoffs when it looked like all hope was gone.
Right.
So I think from that standpoint, you kind of have to look at the season like it was a success, just for where they were at, what it was looking like. It was looking like a top 10 draft pick was going to go to Oakland because they traded for Amari Cooper. They were like they were on the verge of 6-10, looking like the New York Giants. So I think you kind of have to look at it like a success now that I think about it. But yeah, I think I think Jason Garrett, and this is where I go back and forth on it. I kind of can't make up my mind either one way or the other. I can see reasons why he should go, but I also see reasons why he should get at least one more year. He's tied to this quarterback. Quarterback's going into the final year of his rookie deal, so let's see what he can do.
All right, so make your official pick. Cowboys, Seahawks.
Cowboys 26-23.
Yeah, 25 I think is the magical number. I'm going to go Cowboys. I think they covered the 2 points. I'll go Cowboys 27, Seahawks 24.
The funny thing about your magic number 25, Cowboys and Seahawks. Cowboys at home, Seahawks on the road, both average 25 points per game.
Should be fun. All right, Cowboys, Seahawks. Make sure to check the pregame show, 4 o'clock on Saturday. Of course, kickoff at 7. The postgame show to follow on the Dallas Cowboys Radio Network and 105.3 The Fan locally. Make sure to follow Patrick on Twitter at Draft Cowboys and check out all the great work he does for WFAA. I am at Ari Sports, ARI Sports. And of course, I stream live every day on Facebook at facebook.com/WatchPhantom at 12 o'clock Central Time. But for now, we're out. Peace.